This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
Whispers in the Willow Wood. In the heart of Willowwood, where the trees whispered secrets older than time, there stood a dilapidated house, its history as enigmatic as its inhabitants. The villagers spoke of the Endicott family in hushed tones, their tales woven with fear and fascination. The last of the Endicotts, Eleanor and her brother Thomas, lived in seclusion, shrouded in rumors darker than the shadows that lurked beneath the willow boughs. Eleanor had always known they were different. The village children, with their bright eyes and loud voices, seemed like creatures from another world. Eleanor watched them from the wood's edge, her heart aching with a desire she could not name, yet she also felt a deep-rooted fear, a whisper in her blood that sang of danger beyond the trees. Thomas was the keeper of their secrets, the guardian of the truth that lay buried beneath their home. It was a truth so perilous that even the willows seemed to stand guard, their leaves rustling with warnings. Eleanor did not press her brother for answers. She feared what might spill forth if the dam were to break. The villagers' curiosity was a living thing, a creeping vine that sought to invade the sanctity of their isolation. They concocted stories of witchcraft and curses, of tragic loves and unspeakable acts. But the truth, as it often is, was far more complicated and infinitely sadder than any tale spun by idle tongues. It began with an ancestor, a woman of fierce will and sharp intellect who had been accused of consorting with the darkness. The villagers, in their fear, had set her home ablaze, not knowing she had already perished by her own hand, leaving a legacy of sorrow and rage that seeped into the very soil of Willow Wood. Eleanor felt this legacy in her bones, a constant reminder of their separation from the world. Yet she also sensed something else, a presence that wandered the halls of their ancient home, its intentions as unclear as its origins. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long and thin, a knock echoed through the empty corridors of the Endicott house. Eleanor and Thomas exchanged a look of surprise. Visitors were as rare as a clear night sky in Willow Wood. At the door stood a young woman, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperation. She spoke of being lost, of wandering the woods for hours. Eleanor felt a pang of sympathy, remembering her own feelings of being lost, even in the place she called home. They offered the stranger their hospitality, a kindness born from their own acquaintance with loneliness. But as the night deepened, the air grew thick with tension, and Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that they had invited in more than just a lost soul. Whispers filled the house, not just from the lips of their guest, who shared stories of the world beyond the woods, but from the very walls themselves. It was as if the presence Eleanor had always sensed was stirring, awakened by the breach in their solitude. Thomas grew increasingly agitated, retreating into his role as the guardian of their secrets. He warned Eleanor in hushed tones that the girl must leave come morning, that the balance of their existence was delicate and easily upset, but the night had plans of its own. A storm brewed with sudden ferocity, the kind that could drown out all sound but for the thunder that seemed to roar with voices of the past. The power of the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within the house, as if the very heart of Willowwood was beating in time with Eleanor's racing heart. In the midst of the chaos, their guest vanished. Searching the house revealed nothing but the echoes of their own footsteps. It was as if the storm had swallowed her whole, leaving no trace but a lingering sense of unease. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with rumors anew. Tales of the Endicott's strange visitor and her mysterious disappearance intertwined with the legends of Willow Wood, adding layers to the mythos that enveloped Eleanor and Thomas. But within the house, a deeper truth had been unearthed, a realization that the presence Eleanor had always felt was not merely the ghost of their ancestors' wrath, but the manifestation of their own isolation, a spectre of their fear and longing. Thomas confessed to Eleanor the weight of his guardianship, of how the legacy of their family had been both a curse and a protection. They were bound to Willow Wood, not by the deeds of their ancestors, but by the fear of facing the world beyond the trees, of stepping beyond the shadows into the light. In the end, it was Eleanor who found the courage to confront the whispers in the woods. She stepped into the village, not as an outcast, but as a bearer of truth. She spoke of the Endicotts, not as figures of fear, but as people, shaped by the same hopes and fears as any other. The whispers in the Willow Wood never ceased, but their tone changed. They spoke now not of separation, but of connection, of the shared humanity that exists in the light and in the shadow. Eleanor and Thomas remained in their ancestral home, but the door was no longer barred against the world.
The marionette. In the shadow of a world much like our own, where the moon cast an eerie silver glow upon the earth, and the stars seemed to flicker with whispered secrets, there existed a fear so profound it chilled the marrow of those who dared to acknowledge its presence. This was not the fear of death nor the dread of the unknown, but the terror of losing the very essence of oneself, to be controlled, puppeteered by an unseen force, leaving one's actions no longer their own. This is the tale of Evelyn, a woman who found herself ensnared in the web of such a nightmare. Evelyn lived in a quaint, seemingly tranquil village, nestled between the embrace of ancient, gnarled forests and the whispering waves of a restless sea. The village, with its cobblestone streets and thatched roofs, had always been her sanctuary, a place where time meandered lazily, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Yet beneath this veneer of peace, a sinister undercurrent flowed, a secret that the villagers dared not speak of, even in hushed tones. It began subtly with whispers in the dark, a sensation of being watched when no one was there. Evelyn first noticed the change one crisp autumn evening as she walked home from the market. A shiver ran down her spine, an instinctual reaction to an unseen observer. She quickened her pace, the comforting weight of her groceries suddenly a cumbersome burden. That night, she dismissed it as a trick of the mind, the product of an overactive imagination. But the feeling persisted, grew stronger with each passing day. She would wake in the middle of the night, her heart racing, convinced someone had been in her room, watching, waiting. Yet every time she searched, she found nothing amiss. It was as if the very air around her whispered secrets meant only for her ears, secrets she could not comprehend. The villagers began to change as well. Friends and neighbours she had known her entire life started to act oddly, their once warm and familiar gazes now cold and distant. Conversations ceased mid-sentence when she approached, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung heavily in the air. It was as if the entire village was under a spell, their strings pulled by an unseen hand. One night, driven by a desperate need for answers, Evelyn followed the whispers that haunted her waking and dreaming moments. They led her deep into the forest, where the trees grew so dense that the moon's light struggled to penetrate the thick canopy. In a clearing illuminated by an unnatural glowing mist, she found them, the villagers, her friends and family, gathered in a circle, their eyes vacant, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they were marionettes dancing to the tune of an invisible puppeteer. In the centre of the circle stood a figure shrouded in darkness, its presence a void that seemed to swallow the light. Evelyn watched, horror-stricken, as the figure raised its arms, and the villagers moved in unison, their voices joining in a chant that twisted the air with its malevolence. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. It was as if she too had become a puppet, her strings pulled by the same malevolent force. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. The whispers, the feeling of being watched, it had all been a preparation, a way to break down her defenses and make her susceptible to the control that now held the village in its grasp. She was not an observer, she was the final piece, the last soul to be ensnared. As the figure turned its gaze upon her, eyes glowing with an unholy light, Evelyn felt her will slipping away, her thoughts no longer her own. Yet, in the depths of her mind, a spark of resistance flickered to life. It was the essence of who she was, the part of her that refused to be controlled, to be made a puppet. With a strength she did not know she possessed, Evelyn tore herself away from the figure's gaze, breaking the invisible threads that sought to bind her. She ran, the chant of the villagers echoing in her ears, a cacophony that seemed to chase her through the forest. She emerged at dawn, breathless and alone, the village behind her forever changed. Evelyn knew she could not stay, that the fight she had won was but a temporary victory against a force that would never cease its pursuit of control. And so she wandered, a lone figure against the backdrop of a world that held unseen terrors in its shadows. Evelyn's tale became a whisper on the wind, a cautionary story of the price of freedom and the constant vigilance required to safeguard one's will against the darkness that seeks to consume it. The fear of mind control, of losing oneself to the manipulation of external forces, is a primal terror that lurks in the heart of humanity. Evelyn's story, a testament to the strength of the human spirit, serves as a reminder that, even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the will to resist, to remain oneself, is the most powerful weapon one possesses.
The surgeon's shadow. In the heart of a bustling city stood the towering edifice of St. Elmo's Hospital, a beacon of hope and a testament to the advancements in medical science. Among its distinguished staff was Dr. Henry Faulkner, a surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives, but beneath the sterile luminescence of the operating lights, a darkness began to unfurl, weaving a tale of horror that would soon engulf the hallowed halls of St. Elmo's. Dr. Faulkner was a man driven by an insatiable quest for knowledge and perfection in his craft. His colleagues revered him for his skill and dedication, but whispers of unease began to circulate. Patients under his care started to report strange occurrences, fleeting shadows in their rooms, sensations of unseen presences, and inexplicable lapses in their will. The hospital was abuzz with rumors when the first body was discovered. A patient who had been in perfect health post-surgery was found lifeless, with no apparent cause of death. The autopsy revealed nothing, and the medical staff was left in bewildered fear. Then another patient died, and another, all of them linked to Dr. Faulkner. Detective Mara Hollis was assigned to the case, her skepticism of the supernatural unease within the hospital's walls soon giving way to a chilling realization. The deaths were not mere coincidences or the result of malpractice. They were murders, meticulously planned and executed with surgical precision. As Hollis delved deeper into the investigation, she discovered a hidden side to Dr. Faulkner. He had been experimenting with ancient medical texts, delving into forbidden knowledge that spoke of controlling the human mind and body, transcending the limitations of traditional medicine. It was as if he sought to play God, manipulating his patients' wills and bending them to his desires. The hospital became a place of terror, its corridors echoing with the fear of those who entered its doors. Patients began to refuse treatment from Dr. Faulkner, and his colleagues distanced themselves, their respect turning into suspicion. Dr. Faulkner, however, remained undeterred. His experiments grew bolder, his obsession with control tightening its grip. He believed he was on the verge of a breakthrough that would revolutionize medicine, unable to see the horror he had become. Detective Hollis, in her relentless pursuit, uncovered a pattern to the murders. Each victim had been part of Dr. Faulkner's experiments, their deaths a consequence of his attempts to manipulate their minds. The realization struck her with chilling clarity. The surgeon was not saving lives. He was taking them, consumed by his dark quest for control. In a climactic confrontation, Hollis faced Dr. Faulkner in the very operating room where he had performed his ghastly experiments. Surrounded by the instruments of his trade, the surgeon confessed to his crimes, his voice a chilling mix of pride and madness. He spoke of his patients as mere vessels, a means to an end, his ambition blinding him to the sanctity of life. But as he prepared to claim his final victim, Hollis managed to subdue him, the hospital's security team bursting in to arrest the fallen surgeon. As they led him away, the shadows seemed to recede, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. But the damage had been done. St. Elmo's would forever be haunted by the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. In the aftermath, the hospital struggled to recover its reputation. Dr. Faulkner's experiments were exposed, revealing the depth of his madness. The medical community was forced to confront the darkness that could lurk within the pursuit of knowledge, the fine line between healing and harm. Detective Hollis, her belief in the rational world shaken, could not shake off the haunting images of what she had witnessed. The case had left her with a deep-seated mistrust of the medical establishment, a reminder of the potential for evil disguised in the guise of care. As for the patients and staff of St. Elmo's, they were left to grapple with the fear of what might lurk behind the facade of those who were sworn to protect them. The hospital, once a symbol of hope, now stood as a grim reminder of the fragility of trust and the terror that could arise when it was shattered. The story of Dr. Henry Faulkner and the horrors of St. Elmo's Hospital spread far and wide, a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the loss of humanity in the pursuit of power. It was a reminder that the true essence of medicine lay in compassion and respect for life, values that Dr. Faulkner had forsaken in his dark quest. As the city moved on and the memories of the terror faded, the legacy of the surgeon's shadow lingered, a whisper in the minds of those who had witnessed the darkness, a warning that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again.
The lingering. In the dim light of twilight, the house at the end of Corwin Street stood silent, its windows like blind eyes turned inward, reflecting nothing of the outside world. This was a place touched by an inexplicable sorrow, a sorrow as dense and impenetrable as the thickets of brambles that had overgrown the path leading to its once welcoming door. Mara had inherited the house from a lineage of whispered tragedies, a legacy she had tried to flee from, but now found herself returning to. It was as if the house itself had summoned her, its call threading through the fabric of her dreams, pulling her back across the years and miles of distance she had put between herself and her past. The house, once a symbol of prosperity and familial unity, had become a mausoleum of unspoken grief and secrets after the tragic death of Mara's younger brother Eli. He had drowned in the river that ran like a silver thread through the woods behind the house. His body never recovered, leaving a wound in the family that never healed. Their mother, unable to bear the loss, had withered away into shadows and silence, leaving Mara and her father to navigate their shattered lives alone. Mara's return to the house was met with an air of cold expectancy, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what she would do. She felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, a presence that was both foreign and intimately familiar. It was in the quiet moments when the house seemed to breathe with a life of its own that she felt him most acutely. Eli, or at least the memory of him, infused every corner, every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of shadow that danced in the candlelight. As days bled into nights, Mara found herself caught in the web of the house's sorrow, a sorrow that echoed her own. The past, she realized, was not a place one could leave behind, for it clung to the soul like a second skin. Eli's absence filled the house, a void so palpable it was as if he had never left, as if he was still there, just beyond the veil of reality, reaching out for her. Mara's father, once a stoic pillar of strength, had become a ghost of his former self, wandering the halls with vacant eyes, murmuring apologies to a son he could no longer see. It was in his moments of lucidity that he spoke to Mara of the family curse, a legacy of guilt and grief that had clung to their lineage like a shroud. It was said that the house, built upon land soaked in the blood of forgotten wars, was a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, where souls trapped in torment sought release. In her search for understanding, Mara delved into the family's archives, uncovering diaries and letters that spoke of generations haunted by loss and guilt, each story a thread in the tapestry of their collective suffering. It was here, in the written confessions of her ancestors, that she found a reflection of her own pain, a realization that the ghosts that haunted them were not just those of the dead, but of the living, carrying the weight of past traumas and unspoken sorrows. Determined to break the cycle, Mara sought to confront the ghost of Eli, to give voice to the grief that had remained silent for too long. One night, under the waxing moon, she went to the river, the place where her brother had met his end. There, amidst the whispering reeds, she called out to him, her voice a beacon in the darkness. What answered was not a voice, but a feeling, a rush of cold air that wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. In that moment, Mara understood that Eli's presence was not a haunting, but a guarding, a protection against the darkness that sought to consume them. He had become a part of the land, a sentinel watching over the boundary between life and death. With this revelation, Mara returned to the house, her heart lighter, though still laden with sorrow. She began the work of healing, of mending the fractures within herself and her family. She spoke openly of Eli, of the pain of his loss, but also of the love that remained, unbroken by death. In doing so, she began to see the house not as a tomb but as a testament to resilience, a place where the scars of the past could become the seeds of new beginnings. Years passed, and the house at the end of Corwin Street slowly shed its aura of grief, its windows once again reflecting the light of the living world. Mara, now a keeper of her family's legacy, understood that the true horror was not in the hauntings of the dead, but in the silence of the living, in the refusal to acknowledge the wounds that bind us to our past.
The children of Silvershade. In the quaint village of Silvershade, nestled between the embrace of ancient woods and the whispering caress of the Windermere River, an uneasy quiet settled with the dusk. The villagers, accustomed to the predictable rhythm of country life, found themselves disrupted by an inexplicable event that would mark the beginning of a profound transformation. It began on a night veiled in a dense fog, unusual for the time of year, when a piercing light from the heavens descended upon the village. The following morning, life resumed its usual pace, yet an imperceptible alteration had taken root, unnoticed by the villagers. It was only when the local school reopened after the holidays that the seeds of unease were sown. The children of Silvershade returned to their classes not as they had left. They were, to an observer, unchanged, yet their parents whispered of a strange detachment, an unnerving precision in their speech and actions. It was as if the children overnight had shed some integral part of their youth, their innocence replaced by an alien maturity. Mr. Ellsworth, the headmaster, was the first to voice his concerns publicly. He spoke of the children's newfound intellect, their unnerving ability to grasp complex concepts with ease, and their peculiar habit of gathering under the moonlit sky, silent and unblinking, as if in communion with the unknown. As days passed, the village was gripped by a growing paranoia. The children, once the heart of Silvershade's community, were now its enigma. Their parents grieved for the loss of the children they once knew, replaced by these strangers who bore their faces. Whispers of alien infiltration spread like wildfire, stoked by memories of the light that had descended upon Silvershade. Investigations commenced, led by a determined group of villagers intent on uncovering the truth. Yet every inquiry led to dead ends, every question met with unsettling answers from the children, who spoke of their mission with a calm that belied their years. The pivotal moment came when Mrs. Harper, a respected teacher, vanished after a late meeting at the school. Her disappearance, following her vocal suspicions about the children's origins, fueled the fire of fear. The villagers' desperation reached its zenith, culminating in a confrontation at the school. Under the gaze of a blood moon, the villagers faced the children of Silvershade in the school's courtyard. The air was charged with an electric tension, the silence broken only by the river's mournful song. It was then that the children spoke as one, their voices melding into a harmonious cadence that chilled the bone. "We are the harbingers," they intoned, "sent forth to prepare the way. The choice is yours, join us or stand aside." Panic ensued, the villagers' fears manifesting in a frenzied chaos. But as quickly as it had begun, the confrontation ended. The children, with a simple gesture, stilled the turmoil, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. In the weeks that followed, Silvershade was transformed. Those who had resisted the children's offer disappeared, one by one, leaving behind a village united under the stewardship of its new inhabitants. The children of Silvershade, now openly revered as emissaries of a distant world, guided the village towards a future unfathomable to the human mind. The village, once a bastion of mundane predictability, became a place of wonder and horror, a testament to the thin veil that separates the familiar from the uncanny. The children, with their alien intellect and mysterious purposes, stood at the heart of this transformation, embodying the duality of fear and fascination that characterizes the unknown. As the years passed, tales of Silvershade spread beyond the confines of the village, inspiring both awe and dread. Yet to the children of Silvershade, the reaction of the outside world mattered little. They had achieved their purpose, forging a bridge between worlds, and in doing so, they had revealed the most terrifying truth of all, that the greatest horrors are not those that lurk in the shadows, but those that walk in the light, masquerading as the familiar, the beloved. And so, the village of Silvershade, with its alien children and transformed inhabitants, stood as a monument to the enigmatic forces that govern our existence, a reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy lies a universe of mysteries, waiting to be uncovered, to challenge our perceptions of reality and our place within it. The children of Silvershade, with their silent vigils under the moonlit sky, remained the custodians of this new frontier, a beacon to the unknown and a harbinger of the changes to come.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.